Meccano, part number 190 from the 1960s in an acid-induced yellow scheme. Hi, if you want even more Meccano goodness, why don't you check out my Patreon channel? And please like and subscribe and leave a comment below. I post updates in the community section, not only for this week's Patreon build, but also for what I'm currently working on. Thank you, and back to the build. Hi, and welcome to the first video. This first build is the Level Luffing Crane from the Crane multi-kit set. The set was first introduced in 1976 and was brought for me by my parents for Christmas in 1978. I was 7 at the time. Innocent to the trials and frustrations that is Meccano, the kit looked interesting and tempting in its box. And to be honest, that is about as far as the kit ever got. From time to time, boredom would drive me back to the set, and I'd be reminded how much I hated it. Loved the idea of Meccano, loved the theory of what could be created with Meccano. Just lacked the skills to build anything that would remain upright for any length of time and not be so unsteady as to remind me of a newborn giraffe. Now, at the fast approaching tender age of 50, I find I enjoy it a lot more. I have, across time and many years of mechanics, found a love of the challenge that these kits pose. Throughout this video, my cats have decided to make on-screen appearances. Like all cats, they know that YouTube is driven by cats. And having them in your video helps to increase the views. And also, that they've been keen to get on this act for a while. So what is a level luffing crane? Luffing refers to the action of moving the jib or the arm of the crane. A level luff refers to the act of keeping the lifting hook in the same place during the movement of the jib. Originally, this action was required by years of skilled on-the-job training by the crane operator. Later, by engineering, as in this model, the action was done automatically. This crane uses a method called topless, and it is one of the early designs invented by an engineer from Stotharth and Pitt in 1914. The luffing action is performed by the end of the jib rising and falling, and the hook is kept level by automatically paying out enough extra cable. This is a purely mechanical linkage, arranged by the reefing of the hoist cables to the jib over pulleys at the crane's apex above the cab, so that luffing the jib upwards allows more free cable and lowers the hook to compensate. This action is vital for the safe operation of the crane when the load is lower to the ground, and explains the popularity of fixed jibs in construction and shipbuilding, with cranes like the hammerhead crane in shipyards and the tower cranes on construction sites. Construction of the crane is very simple. The base is made up from 4 angle girders braced with strips for added support. The top of the base is a flange plate which acts as the housing for the bearings to support the crane's main body while it turns, and the spigot which allows the crane to move through 365 degrees. The base of the cab is a pulley with angle girders attached. The sides of the cab are made from flexible plates, flat trunnions and strips. Arnie the cat is just popping in to say hello at this point. Later his mum will test the playability of the crane. One of the strange things about filming myself is that I hadn't realised how often I stick my tongue out while doing difficult tasks. Now, there's a reason for this. The tongue is one of the most active muscles in the body. Rarely staying still, it is sending a constant stream of data to the brain. Things like, the tea is too hot to drink. This tea has now gone cold, just time to make a new pot. That was a nice biscuit. Where's the next one? What do you mean there isn't a next one? Diet? What do you mean diet? Don't you swear at me. So, when you need extra concentration, the brain anchors the tongue by sticking it out of the corner of the mouth and clenching it between your lips. This has to be true. I read it on the internet, on some medical looking website that also had an advert up for reversing hair loss. Oh boy, do I need that. At this point, I am constructing the cable drum for the luffing mechanism of the jib. I've built this more than once and never had an issue in the past. For some reason on this build, the locking nuts just failed to lock. Now, I think I know why that happened. But this has just bugged me throughout the whole build, leading to this mechanism falling apart regularly. What I think happened with the nuts was that they have a flat side and a slightly beveled side. And I think I managed to put the two beveled sides together and therefore failing to allow a large enough locking surface. The more observant of you will notice that I've managed to build the gears with the intention of the band driving the cable drum. I put this down to only having drunk 2 mugs of tea at this point and only having consumed 1 custard cream biscuit. The housing for the gear mechanism is built from a flange plate that makes the back of the cab and 2 flexible plates. Through this passes 2 rods, a number 26 pinion acting as the driving gear. This makes contact with a 27A 57 tooth gear wheel which powers the cable drum. All of this is powered by a 3-volt motor driving a band that transfers to a 1.5 inch pulley that powers the pinion gear. Power for the lifting hook comes from a 19 tooth pinion gear driving the 57 tooth gear wheel. The pinion is called the driving gear and the gear wheel is called the driven gear. By dividing the number of teeth of the driven gear by the number of teeth of the driving gear, you get the number of revolutions needed to turn the driven gear once. In this case, 57 divided by 19 is 3, giving you a ratio of 3 to 1. Out of interest, when Meccano first started the 27A gear wheel, it was 56 teeth. I wonder what the effect of the 2.9 to 1 ratio was having. Having one of the originals in stock, I might have to try that out at some point and see what the difference is. Or whether Meccano just wanted the maths to be simple and correct, to teach the theory of absolute ratios, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, etc. The motor I'm using is 40 years old, and while it works, I think I'm going to need to replace it soon with something new. Puss, my tabby cat, likes to use me as a springboard to jump up to the top of the cabinet behind where I'm sitting. Always find it important in life to know your place and role. In my case, it's a springboard for £10 Tomcat. The construction of the front of the cab includes bending a plate. This is something I'm probably going to say a lot. I hate bending plates. I really hate bending plates. Metal does not respond well to being bent. I've had to disconnect the pulley from the base of the cab to fix the cab front. Every time I've made this kit I've had to do this, and to date I've never found a way of reconnecting it correctly. The fit is so tight I don't think it's a problem. Out of interest, I've since found out this design was created by Claude Topless. He was the chief engineer for Stothard and Pitt. His patent dates back to 1912, not 1914 as my previous research had said. I wonder if his first models were made out of Meccano. This is not the original motor that came with the kit. That has long since died, mainly at the hands of a certain young boy who was great at taking things to bits and not so great at putting them back together again. Evelyn Waugh sums up the young me perfectly in his quote about children. I can only see them as defective miniature adults, fectless, destructive, frivolous, sensual, and humourless. And while I disagree with him on the rule in general, it was a good gauge of the young 7-year-old destroying the motor to see how it worked, and still not understanding it after I'd destroyed it. And as the child, that's probably what drove me into the safe embrace of Lego. The kits were easier, and after a short investure of time, I had a working model. And why the wish to construct things? Why the driving urge to make a working model? The advertising of Meccano has a lot to answer for. The models that could be made, that all did something, all operated in some fashion. An older brother, who was this great mythical hero of my youth, who was always away hiking in the wild fells around where we live with fellow scouts. A father who, while serving in the RAF just post-World War II, built radar stations and would understand the mathematics and the engineering side. And then there is my great uncle, John Godfrey Parry Thomas, land speed record holder. All these things undoubtedly had a bearing on my desire to compete in this field. But, being badly dyslexic, with the issue of dyspraxia, or poor hand-eye coordination, always seemed to hamper me in my abilities to complete the task. Now, don't get me wrong. I've learned over the years that if you want something, hard work is normally the only way to get it. But the frustration of not being able to complete the task reminds me of my younger self. That this would lead to anger and the part-built, wobbly-legged baby giraffe being returned to the box in disgust and annoyance at my own failures. To sit there until 6 months or a year later, the Meccano box would yet again be brought out of the cupboard to make something. And the cycle would repeat, and another newly born offspring would be returned to sit in the box. But back to the build. The roof is a 2.5-inch square flexible plate, and the first of the pulleys for the luffing mechanism are mounted to it. The cable pays out over the top of the first pulley, up to the head of the jib via a second pulley at the apex of the cab, at which point it returns back to the apex of the cab roof, then back to the head of the jib and down to the lifting hook. The cab windows are made from 2 clear plastic sheets. Both are now a good age at 42 and are beginning to show signs of fatigue and brittleness in the plastic. They are attached by angle brackets, which in turn attach to flat trunnions. The jib is a square girder construction using 4 angle girders. The angle girders are braced together by strip plate attaching in 4 places, and then 2 halves of the girder are held together with 3/4-inch bolts. The head of the jib is constructed from half-round plates and the last 3 pulleys that make up the luffing mechanism. It is hinged at the bottom using 2 angle brackets attached to the bent plate by bolts. I feel that the cab front is a weak construction. The hinge for the jib allows for a certain amount of flex. I don't have a solution for this, it's just an observation. As the kit only has 1 small flange plate, which supports the gear mechanism, I think that Meccano was limited for their options here. To supply a second plate is not an option, and the spare angle brackets, which also could have solved the problem, have been used elsewhere in the construction of the crane. That this was possibly done as a problem for the builder to overcome is not as daft as it might sound. The aim behind Meccano, right from its first inception, was that of an educational toy. And throughout the books you come face to face with problems to solve. The challenge of making the model better. This was backed up with the Meccano magazine, a monthly publication that not only showed the real-life machines that acted as a prototype for the model, but allowed the reader to write in with ideas. Each month saw a modelling competition, where you could submit your own inspirations and ideas, with the possibilities of seeing them put into the next manual update. By the time this kit was produced, Meccano had already had its heyday. The birth of the electronic 1980s was just around the corner. Lego was already a big contender. In fact, the year after getting this kit, I got my first Lego Technics kit in 1979, the forklift truck 850950 set. I still have it sat in a cupboard in an old Clark's shoebox. At the time, I didn't know about Meccano aeroplane constructor sets, the Electron experiment sets from the 1930s. That Meccano had changed colours throughout its life. The link between Meccano, Hornby and Dinky. It was just this toy that I was too stupid to understand and use correctly. And that statement has been part of the problem with my relationship, not just with Meccano, but many things in life. It is easy to call yourself a name, and even easier to believe the name that you call yourself. But in fact, you have to have faith that everything in life is a skill, or ungained knowledge, if it is a skill you haven't got yet. But knowledge is something you can control. You get the choice whether to learn something or not. That you have to have the faith, the drive and the time to invest is all that's needed. And what have I learned from starting this channel? I've learned the thought of stepping off the cliff is far more terrifying than the action of taking the step. But any venture like this always is. I've realised that many of the things I thought I couldn't do, could never learn, were simply too stupid, are now new skills. Okay, maybe not good ones, but they are, after all, just the beginning of what will hopefully get better. That if nothing else, it has given me something to do as I nurse my mother through her final years. Because that is a thing you only get to do once. Maybe try and repay the debt of her care when I was a child. And also have some fun building, creating and learning new knowledge. And now for my first day as the crane operator in the Ginger Fairy shipyard. What could possibly go wrong?